Hello out there, and today we're going to be getting into the 10 things that you need to know about the newly released CRKT Thero, beginning with number 1, a budget torrent. And for those of you who aren't aware, the designer of the Thero, TJ Schwartz, is most well known for designing a knife by Millet Knives called the Torrent, and that's a much more high-end knife. It is around $450, I think, for a lot of them, and then it goes upward from there, I believe. But there are a lot of design similarities just in aesthetics to the Thero here, especially with these like cutout holes on the scale and the overall blade shape and length as well. There's a lot of different variations of the Torrent, but this blade shape is one that a number of them share. And while I have handled a Torrent a couple times and I remember it being a little bit smaller, I think my memory is incorrect because the information that I looked up basically said 3.2 inches for the cutting edge of the Torrent, and as you can see, we're basically looking at the same thing right here with the Thero. So anyone who is very much interested in the Torrent, you're going to have something that's pretty comparable just in terms of look and specs in this CRKT budget kind of version. So it's very cool for a number of people, myself included, who have looked at and have wanted a knife like that for a long time to be able to get something like this for about 1/10 of the price. So that is definitely a good thing. Sliding over into number 2, obviously there's going to be a compromise when you get a budget kind of knife. You're going to get budget materials. So what we are looking at with the blade steel here is 8CR14 MOV. The 14 versus the 13 for me means absolutely nothing. There's no discernible difference in my experience between this and 8CR13. We do have a black coated blade. As far as the blade coating goes, I'll say that it has held up pretty well compared to a lot of the stuff, a lot of the budget stuff that I have had lately, especially some of the stuff from Kershaw and some other models. If we look at another TJ Schwartz design from CRKT, here is the Caligo, and this coating on this blade, if you have one of these, seems a little bit more powdery. And I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see it on camera here. It just might be a little grainy looking, but it's a little more powdery, and this one has shown more wear than I think the Thero will. I think the Thero one is just a little more consistent, and it's a little darker as well. So we do have that going for us with the 8CR14. Getting into number 3, though, a big benefit and one thing that is sort of a surprise and that I didn't expect, the amount of jimping and the quality of the jimping makes this possibly the best CRKT jimping that I've ever seen. I mean, this is some really good stuff. There's a lot of it. It's useful. It's done in a way that is actually going to grab the thumb really well, no matter where you want to hold the knife. So yeah, I really can't say enough about that, because budget blades, for the most part, when they start to pull back on where they're going to be spending money, I usually see it with jimping, the quality of the jimping or the amount of it, or even having it at all. And CRKT really went all the way with it here, and it really does make a big difference in the way that this knife is going to feel in hand. Moving into number 4, clever plastics. The plastic aspect of the scale actually is another beneficial thing to the ergonomics. And when we look at the plastic itself, it isn't particularly great. It isn't it isn't anything special. It is a little bit slick. The best comparison I have to that plastic is actually the plastic on most of the mini grips. I mean, it feels very similar. The mini grip is saved because it has this very nice textured piece in the middle of the scale. So the whole scale isn't super slick. And this knife, the Thero, is saved by the presence of these thumb holes. Just a lot of points of contact that aren't sharp. They're molded nicely, and you can get a pretty darn good grip here. So you have a very cheap and inexpensive scale, but it's executed in a way that is intelligent and it's thoughtful to aid in the ergonomics, and that just in conjunction with the jimping makes it a very good knife in the hand. Getting into number 5, I'm going to jump over to a shot of this knife disassembled and talk a little bit about the carbon fiber that is beneath the scale. So here we have the knife disassembled. You can take a look at all of the components and sort of what we have here with the Teflon washers, the pivot, and then this red accent that is like separated from the rest of that pivot collar. Here is the other side of the scales that is still intact, so you can see how that carbon fiber looks beneath the plastic scale. And then up here we have the carbon fiber separated from the plastic scale with the plastic scale on top here. And I just wanted to mention and show how they did this, because while it seems like common sense, it is actually, I think, a very smart way to execute carbon fiber, just in that you have a piece of it that is the budget kind of carbon fiber that I'm usually not a fan of because it's really slick and glossy, but it sure does look good. And in this case, they found a way to incorporate the looks without creating a detrimental kind of feel, which is what always happens when you have this on a scale. It just gets super slick. And while these scales are not particularly grippy, they're certainly better off than they would have been had they been all carbon fiber. And I like the fact that they were able to bring in some of the feel and the look of the Millet Torrent into this Thero by executing it that way. So very smart and super cool. And yeah, overall, I think it looks good that they did it that way. All right, guys, and continuing now with number 6, and that is additional cost-cutting decisions. And I wanted to talk about this because on the last review I did on the Pete, so much of, I think, the value of this knife was CRKT making great decisions when it came to where to spend their money and where to cut things out in order to keep it a budget knife. Now, with the Thero, there's a lot of that done as well. A lot of things and decisions that they made as far as materials or machining and processes that you can see they did some very smart things, like the plastic and the carbon fiber. And there's one thing that I just wasn't really a big fan of. So let's go through a couple more of them real quick. One of them is just the lack of machining on the liners here. The liners really provide the entire strength of the knife. The scales are very, very thin and light, and that plastic is not really doing much for the structure of the knife. But you know, even without any extra weight relief, we're at 3.15 ounces. So I think it was a good call to just keep the liners the way they were and not try to do anything with them. So that's one good thing. Another one that I noticed and I sort of liked is just on the Pete, they had a lot of chamfering around this opening hole. The Thero, not so much, and really more than anything else, the Thero isn't really meant to be opened with that hole at all. So it's really just meant to be used with a flipper. We'll get back to that in just a minute when we talk about the way to open this knife. But yeah, not having that chamfering and just making this 90 degrees and a little bit sharp isn't really a bad thing in this case. You know, and being able to maybe save a couple bucks doing that and give us this red accent, stuff like that. I don't know what the balance is in the give and take, but you know, getting what we got and sacrificing what we did in this case is certainly not a bad thing. The only place where I would have any question about it is just with the washers. The washers on this knife and the action, it's not particularly bad. And let's just get into number 7 with the action and the snappy detent. The action opening isn't really bad on the washers, but this is a knife that you look at this design and you think probably should be on IKBS, especially with people maybe having handled the Torrent in the past or having an understanding of it and knowing what that knife could be. You know, you probably want it to have something a little bit, not better, because good and bad is not the right way of looking at things in this case, but I think you want something a little bit more professional, something that feels a little bit more high-end, because you do have a design that is a high-end design. So I would have really liked to see, just for the fidget factor and to make me feel that this is the best expression of this design possible, I really would have liked to have seen this on IKBS, just to have it super smooth. Now, that being said, this is a very snappy knife to open. It is a lot of fun to open with the flipper. It's great. Just because the detent is so super strong. I mean, when you just try to pop it open, It's very loud. And if you're going to try to like just push this open, it's not easy to do. So it's not meant to be open that way at all. Now, I can and I have been able to spider flick it, but it can't be a forced thing. It has to be a very relaxed, get the knife in the hand and then just go for it really quickly, because if you put any pressure on these scales at all, you're not going to be able to do it. So the opening really is just intended to be done with the flipper. It's very easy to actuate, and once you break that detent, you're not going back. I mean, it's opening really nice and snappy, but you know, it's not going to drop and be fidgety the way you would want it. And again, the way the expression of the design that we've seen in the past could be. And so I think that's a little bit of a misfire from CRKT. A lot of really good decisions with what they did with this knife, but a bit of a misfire with this action and not putting this on IKBS. Getting into number 8, just sort of a clip. That's how I feel about the clip. It's just sort of a clip. It's not reversible. It's not a bad clip. It's not a great clip. It's a clip because there has to be a clip. And it works just fine. And I don't have anything really negative to say about it. I don't have anything really positive to say about it. And that's sort of how, in a lot of cases, a clip should be. So that is that. Getting into number 9. So what's the value? Value $45 for this knife. I don't know, CRKT, they keep, you know, they for the most part, the Peep maybe being an exception, they keep pushing a lot of these budget knives more further up to the top of the budget range. Some people say budget is under $50. I always say it's under 30, so this is not even considered a budget knife in my estimation. Is it worth $45? Certainly is for the person who's a fan of the Torrent and a fan of TJ Schwartz and wants to get one of his knives at a more discounted rate than some of the high-end stuff. Absolutely. Is this the best that CRKT has done for the money? I don't think so, but I think they have done a pretty darn good job at aesthetically, definitely with this design, and even more so just the way that it's going to be in hand and being able to use it. You know, some of the minor things that I've talked about, the preferential things, aren't really that huge of a deal when it comes to performance, but they're just things that I don't know, I'd like to see them focus on and like to see them prioritize a little bit more, especially that action that we just covered. So $45 I think is a pretty fair price. There's a lot of other stuff out there on the market. If you're a steel person, you're going to say it immediately. There's a lot of stuff that you can find for cheaper with better steel, so I mean, there's always that argument to be had, which I'm sure we'll have in the comments because we always do. But if you were looking at this one and were really into it, I don't think that you're going to be disappointed at the $45 that you spend. So, number 10, overall, where is this knife in terms of balance and what is the overall recommendation? I do recommend it. I think that a lot of people down the road are going to be maybe a little bit more impressed with other variations that come out. I would say that CRKT is most definitely going to do that. They are going to give us a D2 version, maybe some different colors or something. Like every year when they announce their new models, there are a couple that I earmark and I think, yeah, that one is going to be one that Blade HQ ends up getting a couple exclusives for, and I can totally see that happening with different colors of like the pivot collar here or something else beneath the carbon fiber. I mean, there's really no end to what they can do and different colors that they could do, and I'm sure it'll be in D2 steel. So maybe wait for that down the road, but as it is, I think it is a pretty darn decent knife, and it does have a good balance of like structure, usability, and looks for a decent price. I mean, there's a lot going on to go into this package. Even though I know there are things that are better out there for cheaper, there's always going to be that discussion. But this one, everything that you get in this package for under $50 is pretty darn good. So that's my take. Those are the 10 things you need to know. Thanks for watching, guys. Any other questions, comments, complaints, let me know down below, and I will talk with you soon. Take care and have a good one.